Welcome to the EIC Summit session titled Catapulting from Spin-off to Global Player, a medtech journey from the beginning to the end. We will be discussing today with investors and technology practitioners the strategies, the challenges, and their experience on how to get from lab idea to the end user, to the market. I'm Enric Claverol. I'm the Program Manager for Health and Medical Technologies. I will be moderating the session today. I oversee the medical technologies portfolio at the EIC, and our goal is to clearly bring these technologies to market as soon as possible, which means to patients as soon as possible. We also want to create startup companies that are viable economically and global, if we can make them global. And maybe one additional side effect, we want to contribute to the union, 27 countries union. Now today we have a distinguished set of panelists, and I'm very grateful that they found time to join us, not always easy. From the investment side, we have Marco Huesch, with extensive experience in healthcare investment at Ping An. We have Sofia Ioannidou, a partner at Andera Life Sciences. Thank you, both of them, for finding time to be with us. From the technology and entrepreneurship side, we have Professor Farshad Moradi, who heads one of our early stage projects. We typically call these projects Pathfinder projects. And Louis de Lillers, the CEO of CorWave, one of the companies we invested this year. I think it's actually the first company in which the EIC fund invested this year. Now let's start with a very quick introduction. Marco, would you like maybe telling us a little bit about yourself personally, where you come from professionally, what's in your mind? Just a brief introduction, please. We don't hear you, I think.
I apologize. I was going to say thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with so many distinguished guests, investors, and entrepreneurs. I'm Marco Huesch. I have the privilege of working for one of the largest financial conglomerates in China called Ping An Group. And I was until recently the chief medical officer of the Ping An Global Voyager Fund, a $1 billion evergreen health tech fund, where I've been for almost 5 years, made 5 investments, mostly in medtech in Europe, Israel, China, and America. Very pleased to be here, share some of my thoughts along with my guests, my co-guests, co-panelists, such as Sofia. And, you know, one of the things I want to be very honest about, maybe I should disclose this very briefly, is that I would love to be able to tell you that I have a robust, rigorous, evidence-based process through which we scout, evaluate, and invest in deals. I don't, and I want to be honest about that. And so maybe some of the heuristics that I use when we're all time constrained, have biases and blind spots, maybe that can be very useful in a very frank way to members of the audience listening in to the way we do things here. Thank you again, Enric.
Thanks for that. I've heard many VCs, very successful ones, just say this is intuition, really. So you're really being very honest, and I really appreciate that. The heuristics is built up of experience, so we'll try to extract as much as we can from you about this experience. Thank you for being with us today. Sofia, please, could you please introduce yourself again, your background, where you come from, what are your interests?
Sure. So first, let me thank you, Enrique, and the organizers for inviting me to this panel. Really appreciate it, and very happy to participate. So I'll start with a small introduction to Andera Partners. We are a Paris-based VC that invests in life sciences, so we do biotech and we do medtech investments. We're completely agnostic in terms of therapeutic area and also modality. So in the medtech space, for instance, we've invested in percutaneous valves, the cardiovascular space, up until surgical robotics, just to pick a few examples. In terms of stage of development, we're also pretty broad and have gone as early as a prototype stage, which is pretty early for us, maybe not for the audience of today's panel, but we go quite late and have invested up until a CE mark stage. And then in terms of geography, we're predominantly a European investor, and about a third of our investments are in the rest of the world, which ends up being the United States. Just a couple of words for me personally. I'm a scientist by background. I'm a biochemist, cell biologist. I spent a bit of time in the biotech industry, then a couple of years at the management consulting firm, and then joined the venture capital industry a bit over 10 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That sort of mixed background in biotech, private sector, and then investment, that's great. And I'm sure you have also some heuristics derived from that background, and people will be really excited to hear about that. Next, I would like to introduce you to Farshad Moradi. So he's essentially an academic. He's leading one of our Pathfinder projects. It's called Stardust. Farshad, would you please introduce yourself a little bit, your background, where you come from, and then you can even start showing us a few slides on your project so that the audience can see a little bit what a Pathfinder project is. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and such a pleasure seeing some I've never met. So my name is Farshad, and I'm an associate professor here at Aarhus University in Denmark. And I've been here for almost 10 years now. And my background in general is electrical engineering. I work on IC design or chip design. And what we are trying to do is we want to reduce the power consumption of this small chip as much as possible, and applicable to different applications, but mainly biomedical applications. So I have a group of PhDs and postdocs working on different projects. And also I've started recently a center it's called ibrAIn. So what we are trying to do here within ibrAIn is to bring brain-inspired computing or neuromorphic computing close to the brain implants or brain-computer interface. So this is a kind of a mission that I'm going to do in probably next 10, 20 years. And EU has been generous, giving us a couple of grants. So Stardust is one of those projects. And also I'm a coordinator of another same type project. It's called Spinach, also working on brain-inspired computing, and also a partner of several other future emerging technology in the kind of within Horizon 2020 projects within brain implants and kind of emerging technologies. So I can start my presentation just giving an overview of what is a Stardust project and what we are doing. So Stardust is in general targeting on making brain implants, which is wirelessly powered and can do different jobs. So let's look at what is Stardust. So the main goal of Stardust is to realize a novel wireless implantable device, which is batteryless. So there is no battery in this device. And we send power wirelessly to this small device. When I say small, I'm talking about 500 by 500 by 500. So this is our vision, micrometer cube device that can, in a controlled way, do optogenetics, neural stimulation of the brain tissue, and also do recording and communication, as well as drug delivery. So there was some animation. Unfortunately, it's not shown here, but it's I will explain our platform. Includes UPIB, and so it's a kind of a base and external device that communicate with very small device or implants. We call them dusts because they are very small. And here you can see that this includes some energy harvesting. So we send ultrasonic waves, which is safe for body and brain. We power this device, and we send command how to put light with what duty cycle, what frequency on neurons. We are targeting on Parkinson patient at the moment, but not patient, but we are testing it in vivo in mice and rodents. And at the same time, we want to do drug release to see if our system, we can control the drug release to the brain tissue. So it can be brain or it can be body as well, so as a kind of application. And also we want to record the data through one channel recording and then communicate the data to an external device. So where we are now, so we have filed 4 patents within this project. And you can see this small device and a tip of a finger, so it's quite small. And this is a completely independent device, which includes a piezoelectric device and a chip, and also a LED printed on top of this chip. It's able to do optogenetics at the moment, and also we can send command. It can control the amount of light that we express to the brain tissue. Also, we have been able to make the UPIB in a very small size. That is, it can be a wearable device that can communicate, command, receive data from this small dust. And also we have been able to implement the drug delivery system, which we are using some specific wavelengths of light for releasing drugs into the brain or tissue. So on the communication side, we are still working on it. And then we are also working on the recording and communication part for the in vivo study. The impact is, we believe that it's huge, as it's kind of a neurotechnology platform. We can use it for a stimulation. We can distribute this dust in some places, which makes sense from neuroscience perspective, that they can communicate each other. So one can record, one can stimulate. We can make a kind of a network of this dust in the brain, not huge, obviously, but a few dusts that they can communicate to each other. And so we can use it for body, for example, for photodynamic therapy application. We can use it in a closed loop system, so where you can record the data, you can process the data, and if it's needed, then you can do optogenetics. Of course, it's optogenetics here. Taking it to human probably requires many more years, but it can be adapted nicely to electrical stimulation too. So meaning that we can have a fully implanted battery-less system that can record the data and communicate it, and also it can be in a closed loop system, stimulate the brain. Yeah, I will maybe in the panel I will discuss how far we are from a patient in a clinical setup, and if you have any question, I will be happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Farshad. So they are working on this very, very tiny implantable device. If you've seen pacemakers, they are still in the centimeter sort of range. They're working on a device under a millimeter in diameter. That's the key concept. And that device is already doable today. With the technology that we have, there are many integration issues and VLSI design issues, but it's already doable today. And one key element is that there is no battery in the model they are developing, the design they have, and the power is transferred to them, to those devices inside the body by ultrasound, although there are alternatives like inductive, so magnetic. That's a kind of approach they're taking. And this is early stage. We call it Pathfinder. It's still a little bit far from the market, but all of our projects within Pathfinder should be market-driven. Next, please, Luis, could you please tell us a bit about yourself, your background, your motivation, but also, please, about CorWave as well. Again, this is a project within our accelerator phase of more mature projects within our pipeline, closer to market, closer to CE marking and clinical validation. Please go ahead, Luis.
Thank you so much, Enrique, and the organizer for inviting me to this fantastic first EIC summit. I'm really delighted to be here. So I'm Louis de Lillers, the CEO of CorWave. I joined the company back in 2015 when it was a 5-people company. Now we're a 66-people company, to be precise. And so we're on a long journey in the Elvid space to bring a next-generation device to the market. So a little bit more about myself. I've been in the space for the last 11 years, and prior to that, I was on the I should not say the dark side because we have two representatives of the investment community here, but on the side of the investment. So with Andera Partners, which is a leading venture capital firm in Europe. And initially, I started my career developing web ventures, so not really in medtech, but back in the early 2000s, and I'm business educated. So moving to CorWave, so the issue we're on is heart failure, and every year millions of heart failure patients either die or survive in terrible conditions. And at CorWave, our mission is to save heart failure patients and offer them an active life. So heart failure is a condition and where basically your heart is too weak to pump enough blood to irrigate your entire body. And it's growing worldwide, led by durable trends. And to the point that cardiologists before the COVID crisis called it a pandemic, and it's already affecting over 60 million people worldwide. And it's a terrible disease as the mortality rate is over 60% at 2 years for advanced heart failure patients. It's actually worse than most cancer. And beside that terrible figure, which is really a deadly disease, it's a heavy burden for these patients on their day-to-day life. They have shortness of breath, so really the impression of suffocating. They are exercise intolerant, and mere exercise for them is overwhelming. So left ventricular assist devices, or LVADs, are implantable heart pumps that can restore successfully the blood flow and are implanted in the derivation to the native heart. And these devices are really successful in terms of survival. Yet the current technologies are all retard pump technologies, as the one you can see here, with a rotating piece of metal, so the rotor, which spins at several thousand rotations per minute, and basically impose a continuous flow. So these patients are alive, but they have no more pulse. If you try to measure the pulse, there's no more. And it's kind of a dumb pump in the sense that the speed is fixed, whether you're sleeping or exercising, the pump is providing the same flow. And as a result of these two conditions, first, these patients are associated with a very high level of adverse event. So because these devices are completely disrupting the physiology, so you have 70% of patients affected by a serious adverse event at 1 year. Symptoms of heart failure are coming back when patients are exercising, and a very limited number of patients have a remission of heart failure. So that's where CorWave is coming in. So we actually, in the same footprint as current devices and same surgery, so talking same patients, but with a complete different technology. So in the same envelope, we have this wave membrane technology, which is definitely not a rotor pump technology. So it's actually a technology that is inspired from the fishtail motion, and happens to be the perfect technology to pump in the same manner the heart is pumping, but in a small footprint. So with a physiologic flow, so low shear, pulsatile, and also an adaptive flow that can adapt on the patient activity level. So the expectation that cardiologists and cardiac surgeons, when they see that, is that they believe we can reduce dramatically adverse event because we're not disrupting the physiology anymore, improve activity capacity for patients, promote heart recovery, either partial or full recovery, and really simplify their lives, because right now they have these patients coming back to the hospital, they're in the dark, they don't know what's the blood pressure of these patients. So LVAD is really a kind of Himalaya of medtech. It's Mount Everest of medtech. It's really difficult. On average, is a 10 year of engineering before first in human. The market leader it took them 16 years. And why is it so? It's because it's a life-sustaining device first, and two, you actually working on a system, so like 5 devices within the system, and 3, the different engineering fields and the different fields of engineering and science are really broad, and you're working at the frontier of knowledge. So it's why it's so difficult, and so we're in this journey. You need to have a great team. I'm fortunate to work with a fantastic team of international talents who have successfully developed LVADs before, and we've been bringing a lot of people actually from the United States, because that's where this industry was born, but not only. And so, gentlemen and ladies that are working with us contributed before to very successful companies at the early stage, and to some of them that led to $1 billion value creation. So, and besides that, we have also a great group of younger engineers trained in the best engineering schools around Europe and even also in the United States. So, CorWave is on the market, which is the LVAD, just as a conclusion, that has reached critical mass. So it's pre-COVID, it was close to $1 billion market. Now it's a monopoly, so it's a single-player market and lacks innovation. And patients are really underserved with this high level of adverse event. We have a unique technology that is awaited anxiously by the clinical community, and actually centers representing over 25% of the European market signed letters of intent saying they wanted to use CorWave. We are now structured to move from the R&D phase to the clinic, and I didn't get into these details, but we do have really good data, chronic in vivo data, and beyond that. And what is interesting is that CorWave has the potential to become a global leader, not only because of its technology, but also because of the market structure. In this market, you only have 400 centers worldwide and established reimbursement, so even startups can grow very, very fast once they are in the clinic, and that's our ambition.
Thank you so much. It's interesting how engineers tend to underestimate the complexity of engineering. We're talking about a pump connected at the output of the left ventricle, essentially a pump. But this might take 10 years or longer because there are many details. The devil is always in the detail. So this is a company that we consider pretty mature, pretty close to starting clinical work, to approach CE marking. And you can see already a little bit of the difference. In early stage projects, we typically have an academic driving the project, very much focused on the technology where market is not so important. And with Accelerator, we focus a lot on the market. It's closer to the patient. And typically, the leading team thinks more about the financials and the market-driven reasons to get to the end of the path. Now, let's go to the investors. And Sofia, I wanted to ask you about patterns that you see not just in our projects, in our companies, but in general, when projects approach you as an investor. I'm sure you see patterns, and I could even throw in patterns that I follow myself in my life that I would think, well, maybe I should have changed that. Like, typical thing is, as an engineer, you focus a lot on technology, so you fall in love with the technology, and that goes all the way with you. So patterns like that, behavioral patterns, we see a lot of that in our projects coming from academia and all along the pipeline. Do you see any of those patterns that you might want to pinpoint and say, look, maybe that should be changed? We're not talking about Stardust or CorWave at all. This is a general question, what you've seen in your life as an investor. Any patterns you would like to see changed?
So I think you touched on one of them that I wanted to mention, which is having companies or inventors or academics approaching us with an idea, but without having a clear business case. So it can be a fantastic scientific discovery, some ingenious engineering, but not a commercial application. So it could be lack of an understanding of the medical side, of the competition, of the positioning of a particular product, or even of whether this product would be ever reimbursed or paid at a good price, at least. So very often we see incomplete proposals, if you will, and it's not only engineers. You could have a brilliant medic that comes to you with an idea from the medical side, but then lacks other elements, for instance, engineering elements that have to do with manufacturability, cost of goods. Now, I don't mean to scare people. What I'm suggesting is not having a fully fledged case when an inventor approaches investors, but it is important to have thought about a number of elements in order to have a convincing case that can then develop, of course, and to show awareness in a number of areas and not just the particular area of expertise of the inventor.
Very good. Marco, what from your end, any other patterns that you see often that you think, oh, we should change that, that shouldn't happen?
Yeah, you're right. And whether our thoughts are correct or not, right? I mean, the guy who invented the knockout mice in the US, right, was rejected by the NIH and went and often did it himself anyway. And, so our heuristics, our patterns can be wrong, but, for good or bad, this is how we operate as humans. And I think some of the patterns I see around the innovation itself, if it is too novel, it can be hard for me and my investment committee, which is more important than me, to understand what is being done here, what is being offered. So it is actually much better to have a better mousetrap than a new mousetrap. It is easier to understand, to communicate. It's easier to sell to investors, to regulators, and ultimately to consumers. So I think that's a super important pattern, which is to sort of maybe go modest, right? And do something maybe a little bit smaller incrementally in your first iteration, and then have a product map which goes as far as you dream of privately. I think the second pattern is I do want to see something that speaks to the consumerization of healthcare. I do want to hear the words, these are heuristics, I want to hear the words online, smart, interactive, network, platform, ecosystem. I really don't want to hear just a device per se, right? I want to have it, even in its mildest form, talking to some remote center for predictive maintenance purposes, or just connecting customers with a similar issue. I think of the wonderful work done on sleep apnea, which really took this remote data feed and made it such a differentiator. So yeah, it's another important pattern. I think the third one is, and it's nothing to do with engineering, it's the value you put on your company. When you come to an investor and you are trying to raise 30 million and your valuation is 8 million, and you leave a feeling in people's minds that you haven't appreciated and appropriately presented the wonder and the magic of what you're doing if you're selling yourself short. And I think this is a super important thing. We see none of this humility in Israel or America. We see a lot of it in Europe. And I think it's sort of an engineering-driven humility, which I think ultimately can hurt you a little bit as a pattern when you get in front of an investor. Those are just three, Enric, but I'll pause and throw it back to you.
Very good points. Yeah, these sort of badly understood modesty that doesn't help you in business. Absolutely, this is really relevant. Let me turn to Farshad and Louis again. Let's talk about the hurdles that you're seeing in your path from your technology development in the lab, Farshad, and your position closer to the market, Louis. So what hurdles, what's hampering your progress? What's your perception, Farshad, to get started from the early stage part of our pipeline? What's stopping you from moving faster? What's your perception?
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying, we are in early stage. So nothing is stopping me for going forward. So that's the first thing. We are technologists or scientists. So we are working with interdisciplinary teams to explore things that we have already identified the unmet needs. So we are aware of where this technology can go, especially when you're working on a platform. But and also I've talked to investors. So and probably Marco kind of touched some of the things that I hear sometimes. But I mean, although I'm working with neuroscientists, with the clinicians, and I interact with them a lot, that what is the need there, and I'm aware of the need, but I don't know as a scientist where I should focus from the beginning. So okay, I'm preparing a platform, and then when I talk to an investors, of course he or she wants to know where my investment paid off. And if I say 10, 15 years or even 20 years, then okay, it's a risk in a way, in a risk of investment. So should they invest on this or not? So that's a main hurdle. I see that to communicate with investor, I'm able to excite them, saying, okay, this is where the technology go. It has a huge impact here and there. There are applications. I have a clinician on my side. Then when they ask me, okay, where we should focus to pay off in the next 2-3 years, that's kind of probably disappoint me in a way. I'm saying, okay, it's not a 2 to 3 year project. We are thinking about 15, 20 years. It's a high risk, but it's high gain if we get it done. So that's something. I don't know how is it in US. Probably it's a little different culture we have compared to Europe. I mean, this probably needs to be discussed with more experts within this field. And also, I mean, something that I'm not sure it's about all the regulations to go to the biomedical field. So it's like a curtain in front, or a blind in front of my face. So because people always talk about it takes years to get to the market for clinical setup. So that's two things are kind of making me busy thinking about this.
Those are very good points. I was smiling thinking all the similar stories that either I've seen or I lived through myself. So one of these things about narrative, Sofia mentioned, in your narrative, you should have a clear identification of the market opportunity, and then building this narrative that sounds attractive as well. I think looking at the type of technology you're developing, is miniature electronics, it seems relatively easy to build a narrative around it. You just need to find the application but it's true that if you look at 15 to 20 years, I don't know what Marco and Sofia might think about this, but this is really like a research project, clearly early stage. I doubt investors would jump in if you say so 15 to 20. It sounds like your full academic career. So building the narrative and finding the opportunity and defining it and clarifying it in the narrative. We'll talk about the CE regulation, I think. Louis, would you like to express a little bit your thoughts about hurdles, what's hampering your progress, faster progress in your company? Which is making very good progress, but let's see, how could we go faster?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good question. Looking backwards, where we had hurdles getting there. I think one is finding the right talent, and specifically when you are in a very hardcore technological thing, you need to really get the best experts you can and the people with the right drive. And it took several years to do that for us, because you have only a few professionals around the world. You want to attract the best one, and so that's tough, I would say. And definitely you can probably lose, and probably lost. You could say months and years because you didn't have at the right time the right people. So sometimes it's better to have that later than never. And I think on that end, I think that's definitely a big topic, is getting the right team. In particular when it's very complex as our project was. And so now we're really fortunate to have a fantastic team. I'd say finding funding is complex, and I want to pay tribute to the European Commission. I think the IC fund is a fantastic tool. Taking risk and having a long view on projects, and I think really it gives European startups the means of their ambitions. And definitely CorWave is one of the companies that take advantage of that. So really, this is really game changing, I think, for our ecosystem. Finding centers and clinical centers to run a clinical trial. When you have something really disruptive that can make a big difference to patients, I think it's not the biggest hurdle. And right now there are a bunch of centers that are anxiously waiting to start with us. I think because you're really talking about reaching patients, one thing that keeps me, awake at night is probably when I think about European patients. I'm saying European patients, not patients. I think we were all traumatized earlier this year as Europeans when we saw this mRNA disruptive technology that were actually largely developed in Europe, and we did not have access to it. And I'm afraid, with this currently bumpy transition we have with the European medical device regulation, we may have a similar impact on different therapies and innovations. Because the transition, I'm not saying MDR is a problem, so the medical device regulation, I'm saying that the transition is really bumpy. It's creating bottlenecks with notified bodies. The expert panels are not available for upcoming clinical trials. So basically now, if you're an innovator and you're ready to start a clinical trial in Europe, you just cannot do it because you don't know whether your clinical trial design would be okay for European regulators. So as a company, as CorWave, it's okay, in the sense that there are other markets you can go after, in particular in the United States, where FDA is really open to discuss and see, companies and innovators as a partner. But I think, down the road, it could mean for European patients several years lost opportunities. And I think, that would be a great opportunity for policymakers to put more means in this MDR transition, maybe change some timelines, and also promote a kind of cultural shift that, and look at what has been done on the other side of the Atlantic, so that, you don't act not only as an administration, but also as a partner to industry with the same goal to bring safely and timely innovation to patients. And I think that's where us as European right now, talking about, bringing innovation to patients, that's where the most impactful thing we could do is adding more resources there on this shift, which is important. I mean, we have to do it, that's clear, but we also need to make it so that we're not delaying the access of innovations, another way, building innovations to patients.
Absolutely. I agree with you on the regulatory issues. We have a terrific new regulation, the MDR. My personal view is that we should have a path for innovators in Europe so that you can very easily understand the steps to be taken. We are promoting an internal project called the Innovation Deal to facilitate the creation of a layout for the information we already have without changing the MDR, but making the paths clearer, and then the work flow should be faster and more clearly explained to innovators. And this is ongoing, and I share your concern. We do see lots of comments on CE marking and regulation from our pipeline, so we will try to help them with the Innovation Deal. This is a critical keyword that we have to get through in the system, Innovation Deal on medical technology regulation. So we don't have many minutes left, but I do not want to miss the opportunity of asking Sofia and Marco again about the ways in which you would design a company from scratch. Now, with your experience, we have only 6 minutes left. I'm supposed to wrap up, but I prefer to listen to you, really. How would you create a company from scratch now, with your experience, coming from technology, a typical company from our pipeline? What would you do from the start, the first 5 years, and now maybe include, up to IPO? What would you do in your company with your experience? Sofia, please.
Okay, so starting from scratch. Well, first of all, I would hope that there is a concrete and robust technical solution there that could find application, as we said before, for a medical need, since we're talking about a medtech product. So if that was the case as a basis, then what I would do as an investor to help an inventor or an early stage company would be, first of all, to surround that inventor with the appropriate panel of experts, either in the company or outside the company as a consultant. So again, coming back to the original question of building a commercial case. So if the start of the project is engineering based, it's certain that some medical input would be needed, some regulatory input for the development of the product up to approval, some manufacturing inputs, and of course some commercial input to make sure that there is a commercial case. So team, I cannot emphasize this more. It has to be there from the start, and if it's not internal, at least gather these competencies externally in the form of advisors, consultants, and advisory board, or what have you. And then build a development plan that is rational, that has milestones, go, no-go decisions, because it's important to be, first of all, able to steer to a different direction if one is going down the wrong path, but even to stop. It's better to stop a project early and then put these valuable resources to another project if it's going nowhere. So milestones and go, no-go decisions are really important, both for the project holders, the inventors, but also for investors, because ourselves, we also don't like to put all the money at once. We like to put it in progressively after milestones are achieved and they're de-risked. The project is de-risked progressively.
Thank you. Marco, now you created a company from scratch. How would you do it?
I first of all agree with everything that Sofia said. So not to duplicate it, I would just add a few things, which is governance is super important, right? You need to have someone with the ability to enforce that go or no-go decision that Sofia mentioned. And it needs to be someone with the ability to, if necessary, change the engineering leaders, change the CEOs, right? So a governance driven by a board that is truly independent and truly has the best interests of the company and its shareholders and stakeholders in mind is super important. Too often we see weak governance, and that is a recipe for delays and often long pivots to nowhere. So that's very important. The second thing I would say is building on to the ideas that Sofia mentioned in terms of external advisors and sources of input. I think in this day and age, right, for every capital constrained startup, there is a free resource out there, which is the online communities of end users. And I'm thinking here of a friend of mine who has a wonderful kidney dialysis medical device company in Britain, who has spent so much effort to make sure that patient communities, nursing communities, etc., are bought into his team's innovation. And what that does is it very, very credibly and very cheaply builds the support that ultimately gets KOLs excited, gets regulators and payers excited. So I think that's very important. And then I would return to something that we've said throughout these panel talks, which is that there really has to be an incremental clinical utility for what you're doing. If it's merely something that is cool, that is really not enough to get an investor interested for the most part. We need to be able to show that this is technologically different and better, and that patients will do better, payers will do better, families will do better, physicians will do better, etc., and that the system and the society does better. Being able to articulate that at all levels of the company over time, I think, is vital. And then this is something
10 seconds, Marco.
Yeah. I think I will throw it back to you, Enric. I think there's much more we could do, and I'm sure there are, ways in which Sofia and my thoughts can be shared in a different or parallel way. So
yes.
Let me throw it back to you, Enric.
Absolutely. We have to continue the interaction. We're really grateful that you could be here today. We really need to put you in the loop because it's important we do this as a community. Your feedback is really insightful and very important. And our feedback is always biased by our background, so we have to involve you all. Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you so much to the audience. It's been a pleasure. I hope you can join us in the next session. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Enrique.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.